Benny P, I've got a sizzling secret. A new Hollywood follower has joined the party on my socials.
Really?
There's an asterisk onto that statement. I'll spill the details later in the show.
I'm excited about this.
But wait, there's more. I'm going to tell you how I managed to holiday up on the Northumberland coast and Cornwall without paying for accommodation. And I'll also tell you how you can get into the Eden Project for free on a Saturday. Completely free. Save yourself 40 quid. I live a nomadic lifestyle and I'm never in one place for too long. So from time to time, I find it very convenient to order groceries in the form of a Gusto box. I've been using Gusto for nearly 5 years now. It's a delivery company that sends you fresh food and all the ingredients you need to cook delicious meals at home, along with very easy to follow recipe cards. They have over 90 recipes every week, so there really is something for everyone. And so many of their recipes I've returned to again and again because their meals are just delicious. I've got a referral code. I've shared it with so many of my friends. It means they get cheap groceries on their first few boxes and I get credit in return. I'll link it below. Use it to sign up and you get a pretty hefty discount off your first box. There's no subscription required and you can order just one box whenever you want. Welcome back to the show and welcome to those new eyes and ears. There's been a few more recently who are joining the fold. Thank you for finding us. This is a slightly kind of different episode to the regular series. This is like an offshoot, a series of check-ins and discussions and adventure talk, discussing my own adventures, but also discussing the adventures of my lovely co-host, the one and only Benny P.
Yay!
A man who redefines adventure and adrenaline. The mastermind behind Trailside Coffee, hailed by many Londoners as the best outdoor barista, serving not only incredible coffee, but also an ever-present spark of creativity on every trail he treads.
That's a pretty impressive intro there, Tom. I'm not going to lie. I wasn't expecting that one straight off the bat right there.
Do you want some more?
Don't worry. I'm not sure my head's going to be able to fit through the door at the end of this. It's going to be great.
With lightning speed as a runner extraordinaire, he's the kind of fellow adventurer who pushes every limit while keeping his humour sharp and infectious.
This is good. Okay, stop it. This is too much. This is too much for me. Okay, honestly, come on.
Thank you very much again for joining us. This is the third episode of the series. There's going to be more. It's kind of a check-in that we do about quarterly, so once every three months, which is a nice time for us to do our own adventures and come here and talk about them. And we have quite an episode for you. There's a lot that's happened in the last 3 months. Huge changes, huge adventures that both of us have been on. So it's a wild ride. I can't do my words. It's a wild ride you won't want to miss. Okay, coming up on the show, you're going to talk about your epic adventure conquering the vast deserts of the USA in the Epic Speed Project. We're going to be diving into your heart-pounding journey soon before zooming back home to my own escapades on the rugged beauty coastline of Bamborough and the coastal charm of Cornwall. There's 2 adventures that I've been on in the last few months. In addition, I'll share an update on my writing quest, where I committed to crafting 4 pages a day throughout the winter. Plus, Benny P, I've got a sizzling secret. A new Hollywood follower has joined the party on my socials.
Really?
There's an asterisk onto that statement. I'll spill the details later in the show.
I'm excited about this.
But wait, there's more. Okay, I'm going to tell you how I managed to holiday up on the in Northumberland coast and Cornwall without paying for accommodation. And I'll also tell you how you can get into the Eden Project for free on a Saturday. Not just a Saturday, any Saturday. Completely free. Save yourself 40 quid. I'll share that little tip later. But first, let's hear about what you've been up to in the last 3 months.
Well, I feel like we should start off with what you've just mentioned there, Tom, is that the joys of doing the Speed Project. So again, for the uninitiated, the Speed Project is effectively a unsanctioned race from Los Angeles to Las Vegas. And effectively, there are no rules, there are no spectators, there are no checkpoints. You have to make it over there by your own steam, running the whole way. You can do it either solo or you can do it as part of a team. And I went and did it as part of a freestyle team. And we had an absolutely incredible adventure, completing the journey in about 41 hours, just under 41 hours.
Okay.
So effectively, we did it non-stop the whole time. The gist of it being that you're constantly moving. We have an RV that follows us the whole way. We have support vehicle, and it's just one heck of an adventure, to be honest.
So how long is this distance between Los Angeles and LA?
Yes, so this is the interesting thing. If you read up on this, you will see that everybody mentions how it's 340 miles. And that is true, it is 340 miles, but there are actually a couple of different categories that you can sign up to on the Speed Project. One of them being called the OG, and that one being essentially the original route that the founding members did, which is 340 miles plus, and it actually does follow a direct route. And with this, the only other rule, well, one of the rules being that it's 6 team members and it has to be a split of guys and girls. I think it actually needs to be, I believe, 4 girls and 2 guys, or 50-50, one or the other. Either way, you need an even split. And that is essentially with the OG distance, you have to follow a set route. It follows the roads more than anything else. A couple of little gnarly tracks, but nothing that effectively an RV couldn't get over. Alternatively, you can do what we did, which is essentially called the freestyle one. And there are no rules, no limits. You can make your own route up. So we initially planned a route, the team and I, we planned on doing a route that would be about 280 to 290 miles. However, like most adventures...
So a shorter distance.
It was a shorter distance because we were going off-road, we were going direct, we were running through the actual gnarly desert. There's a route that's known as the Power Lines. It's quite famous now within the sort of the Speed Project running community. Effectively, as it says, you follow power lines, but an RV can't do it, and you have to have a pretty gnarly 4x4 in order to get over it.
I suppose the idea with that is there's like a service route, right? Because service vehicles have to go and service the power lines, so there's some kind of track.
There is some kind of track, but not the sort of track in which a big RV could make its way down. Right. And even 4x4s, as our adventure will demonstrate, even those can come unstuck. So we did originally plan to do the shorter route, but being the adventure that it is, things didn't go to plan, and our 4x4 broke down before we even made it to the power lines in the middle of the desert. So it was very much lost in the middle of the desert that we had no way of getting to it. It was 9 miles away from our RV parked on the side of the road. The front tire blew out, which we thought was absolutely fine. We'll just change a spare wheel. That should be absolutely fine. However, the car did not come with locking wheel nuts. Therefore, we couldn't even change the tire. Therefore, it threw up a whole load of drama and scuppered our original plans. So then we had to pivot, change to a different route, which followed effectively the road. Therefore, the RV could be used along with our other support vehicle. And to be honest, that was absolutely fantastic. It didn't take anything away. If anything, it probably enhanced and added to the adventure, because at this point we had been awake for somewhere around 24 to 30 hours at this point, something like that. Tensions were high at this point as you're having to pivot and change and think on your feet about what to do. But it was great, and I loved it. Everything about it was exactly what I was after for this adventure.
So there's 16 of you in a group.
In our group, there was 12 of us.
12 of you. Okay.
Yeah.
How many of those are runners?
So it's 12 of us were running, and we had 3 people as support crew.
Okay. And how does that running kind of manifest over the time? Who are you doing it in order of 1 out of 12, 2 out of 12, 3 out of 12?
Yeah, again, so I cannot take any credit for the planning in terms of how the teams were split up and how it was run. But essentially what we did was, as 12 runners, we divided into 3 teams of 4. And you effectively, so you'd have pod 1, pod 2, pod 3, so each one team of 4. And the idea being that the first pod would would go about and run. Effectively, there would be a distance that we'd sort of write down that they would do. They could choose to do it however they wanted. If they wanted to run 5K and then change over, or if they want to run 100 meters and change over, they could do whatever they want. But effectively, those distances would vary anywhere between, say, roughly 20 to 30 miles or something, depending on the terrain and
each at a time?
Elevation. Well, each pod would do that.
Each pod, sorry, yeah.
So say a pod was given 30 miles, they could then choose to divvy up that 30 miles however they wanted. As you said, they could just keep rotating, doing 5K each or something, or if they wanted to just do a mile each, they could do that. And then effectively that pod would be rotating with a support vehicle. The RV would be parked further on ahead, so it would go up into the distance, giving the opportunity for the other runners to relax, to sleep, etc. And then once that first pod had done theirs, the second pod would come along and then do another sort of 20 to 30 miles, etc. So there was usually, in theory, there was somewhere around 5 to 6 hours in which each pod had their own downtime. So there was an opportunity there to sort of relax, to unwind, to eat, to stretch, all of that stuff going on. So there was method within the madness. Whether or not you actually stick to it is a slightly different matter. But that's the way in which we decided to plan ours. But you could do whatever you want. If you wanted to, you could go as that team and one person could run themselves 300 miles and the other team could only run 4, and the other 5 people or 6 people or whatever could only run 40. You can divvy it up however you want. And the nature of it being that it's easy enough to set a plan, but when you're over 30 hours without sleep and sort of just kind of hanging on in there, you just need your mates to sort of step up, and you just put your hand up and say, I can do another 400 meters or something, and then I need to swap over, or I'll do another mile or whatever. And that's kind of part of it. Ultimately, it's like you've all got each other's backs. There is no sort of hostility towards anyone doing more or less than the other. It's a team effort, and we're all there to support and just have a good time with each other. And how many times can you get to say that you run from California all the way to Nevada and through the deserts and through the cities and into the bright lights of Vegas? It's quite an experience. So
yeah, and all continuously, right? Did you get much sleep in your off time?
So I managed to get over the 41 hours. I slept for 3 hours, I think, over it. So I would say I was more of an exception than the rule. People got more sleep than I did, but there were just a couple of moments where, again, just needed some extra, just to get some. It's basically the graveyard shift, is that nighttime running between the hours of like 12 till 6 a.m. before sunrise. That's the graveyard shift, where people are they're already quite tired because you've been awake for effectively at least 24 hours by that point. And I was quite happy to do that. We'd often run as pairs in the night because it was just safer. It's a beautiful thing to run in the desert in the evening. Like, if you can just ultimately accept the sort of the nighttime around you, it's incredibly peaceful. You obviously there are moments and wary moments where you're thinking like, you've got a head torch, and that's all you can see in front of you, with the exception of the moonlight as well, if it's out. But it was also a case of you're just thinking, please don't let me step on a rattlesnake. That's all I care about. I'm in the desert, the rattlesnake's camouflaged right there. I just do not want to step on a rattlesnake in the middle of the night going on. But so there's always a couple of sketchy moments.
That's what keeps you awake.
Yeah,
the adrenaline pumping.
But that's it, exactly. You're just thinking, you're just there like, I've got to be hyper alert because what if this happens? Ultimately, I think the rattlesnake thing actually is, it's so unlikely to happen. You're more likely, in fact, we are likely to encounter at some point rabid dogs. That's actually the worst thing about this race, is that you'll run down sections of the road and there'll be packs, and you're just like, oh dear.
Awesome gun wielding American.
It's California, okay. It's not quite as much as that, but
well, in Nevada maybe.
But Nevada, yeah, maybe.
Did you come to a Nevada sign that said "Welcome to Nevada"?
I missed out on that part, so yeah.
I've seen one of those signs. I actually drove a similar route from San Francisco to LA via Yosemite, and that was over a few days, and met friends in Vegas. And arriving at the sign in Nevada, I think I stopped to get a picture, and there's just bullet holes in it.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Because it's in the middle of the desert.
You see this you see that so much. They just go. You see that throughout so many statesides. I just think how proud of us they've been. Like, welcome to our proud state. And it's just like bullet holes all in it.
Can you imagine that in the UK?
Yeah.
We just don't see anything like that over here.
It's like the worst you get is someone will just like tag the sign slightly or something.
Yeah, we've got a bit of graffiti. Some of it is art.
Absolute.
We hold some more graffiti artists to proclaim. Banksy is one of the most world famous graffiti artists.
Exactly.
Okay.
But yeah, it's but no, I missed out on that side of things. The actual, to be honest, because you're moving continuously, you don't really get to see too many. You don't see too many other faces. You do actually like pass quite a few other, like you sort of battle and fight with other teams and things. But you're all encouraging and supporting each other, which is wonderful. So there's fun little moments like that, especially when you go down places like. I think one of my best roads is Death Valley Road. So again, we were very fortunate on this race. It can be freezing there. It can also be disgustingly hot, being Death Valley Road. So we were prepared for the idea that it might be up in the 40s to 50s. However, we, fortunately, and I put those in inverted commas there, but it was about 30, 32 degrees is what it got to for us. So comparatively, quite a calm climate going on there. So that was a very fun experience. And then, there are the occasional diners and things that you pull into and just like top up on food and drinks and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
Because, you needed, obviously, being so hot and like just the weather being that it is and being running, you need electrolytes, you need water, you need constant top ups and everything else going on. So you'd pull in some quirky little things. So.
Yeah, and they're the kind of places you see in like Hollywood films, right?
Yeah,
because that's California's based Hollywood. So yeah, they're usually typically use those kind of locations. I bet that was kind of quite dreamy as well.
Yeah,
surreal.
Yeah.
What was the desert like at night? Was it quite cold?
Surprisingly, not as cold as we thought it was going to be. Again, I feel like this edition, relatively speaking, it wasn't too bad. The wind whipped up, and that was the only downside, was like the wind whipping up, and it would like blast the sand across. So occasionally you'd have to be wearing face masks, glasses and stuff just to make sure that you were protected. But actually, for the most part, it wasn't too bad. So weather-wise, I think, relatively speaking, we had a good edition of the speed project. So that was great. And like I said, you get to go down some cool bits. You're running on the old Route 66 at the end of the day, because I should probably mention this at the start. One of the rules is that you can't run on the freeways and the interstates or anything like that. That's too dangerous. But there are plenty of roads in which are, sort of the equivalent of our dual carriageways or whatever. And cars are absolutely bombing it down. So that is a bit sketchy. You're just running on the hard shoulder, hoping that, nobody's fallen asleep at the wheel or something like that. But for the most part, that was you get to run some cool spots. You get to see the Route 66 on the on the tarmac and things. And that was pretty cool. You're kind of thinking, that's your Hollywood moment, your sort of American dream. Admittedly, we're going from west to east the wrong way around, but still, it was just that was pretty cool.
Nice. But this is a race, and when you're running, you want to be fast.
Yeah.
So what kind of tempo were you running when you were out there?
Yeah.
In trying to manage, knowing that you had to sustain yourself over technically 2 days, I suppose. You
right.
didn't quite know, but you still had to be fast.
Right.
So how are you managing that?
That's a really good question, because, we are, the ultimate end goal is we're there to have a really good time with our mates. However, we are all, at the end of the day, everyone who is in that team, most of them are former midnight runners, captains from various cities. So we all kind of know each other in some way. We also know that we all have like a slight competitive spirit, but we're there to try hard. It's like we work hard, we play hard. And that's the way that we want to be.
Yeah, you want to show up with your best.
Yeah, exactly.
No matter what that is.
It doesn't matter. Yeah, exactly. If ultimately you fall away and you absolutely collapse, it's just, it doesn't matter. It's just like you've given it a good bash, and that's all that matters really in that respect. As long as you've had a good time doing it, we don't really care. Saying that, we did structure it in such a way that we would try and run as quickly as we could. And so the balance that we found were for running anywhere between effectively half a mile to about 1 to 2 miles, depending on how you were feeling.
At a time.
At a time.
Then you were just rotating.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
and that's in your pod of 4.
And that's in your pod of 4. So imagine there were moments in which, as a pod of 4, you were only running you were running half a mile, so about 800 meters or so, and then you were just constantly rotating.
Okay.
So that also puts quite a bit of pressure on the driver, because that person is like, he's having to measure his distance every time. It's also just, it's very stop-start in that respect then, because that's 800 meters, half a mile, in which you're going pretty heavy. You know, you're not there to hang around. You're running faster than you would do at any other point. Our aim was to ultimately average 7-minute mile pace for the whole thing, which I guess is, Tom, help me out with that one. Kilometer speed. Sorry for all of our
mile in kilometer. Has told me okay, so that's
about
a 4-minute 20-second kilometer.
Yeah,
rapid. Yeah, that's about a 3-hour marathon pace, just over 3
precisely.
hours. Yeah, 3:05.
Yeah,
I think
exactly. Yeah, so that's effectively what we were aiming for, was for that the whole journey to average that, and that meant effectively like some people would run quicker, some would run slower. Obviously, there was plenty of elevation involved during this race as well. And actually, I originally was slightly skeptical of this, because I believed that, you know, it's easy enough to do this when you're fresh, but after, 24 to 36 hours without sleep, your body's just going to feel fatigued. But I guess ultimately the idea being that running 1 mile repeats as such just meant that you could keep that speed up. You had enough time to recover, to go again. And that was effectively how we planned on doing it. Everyone can do it differently. I feel like there are moments where I felt it would be lovely if you could do something longer to get into that sort of like that flow state almost, because this was very much like, it's high energy, it's threshold running, it is effectively getting your heart rate spiked for a very short period of time and then having to drop it again. So it doesn't give you quite the same flowing experience that you might have if you were running, say, like a 5K or like a little bit further or something. But at the end of the day, that's a very small price to pay for what was still just an absolutely incredible time out there. So yeah. So
it's kind of like it's a tempo session basically. You'd be running on track, just
yeah.
You do your 2 laps, you have some rest.
Yeah,
another 2 laps. Do you know how much distance you covered in total? Have you tracked that?
Yeah. So our team did, in the end, I think we managed 330 miles.
Okay.
Or a little just under 329.
Do you know how much you did?
I ran 40 in the end.
Okay, so you did 40 miles across 2 days.
Yeah. 40-mile tempo.
Very little sleep.
A 40-mile repeat session.
Yeah.
40-mile repeats.
Blimey. So you're running an ultra in your own right, but a fast one. Most people will do ultras fairly slow, but you've done your tempo sessions. Yeah.
But I feel like, again, But
you get the rest.
Exactly.
And that's what's really important.
Exactly. And that's what I want to stress with people. Like, part of this, don't get me wrong, and this isn't to take anything away from, like, to try and dumb down this, but it's like, those numbers are big, but they're not big in the context of, I have so much rest time in there. I am like up to my gills on adrenaline and electrolytes and just the thrill of doing a race like this. It's a completely different setting to running certain ultras where you need poles, for instance. It's like, we didn't need any of that stuff, not for what we were doing. And at the end of the day, it is just a number. Like it will just, the numbers fade at the end of the day. That's the way I always think of it. It's like, I think that 340 miles is an incredible thing and not to be sniffed at, but it's just a number, especially like from a team's perspective. And it's actually everything that comes along that happens. It's that cliche of like, it's the journey rather than the destination. It's everything that happens in between that truly makes it so special. And you were saying earlier how it was, those ups and downs, and like when you're when you're tired and fatigued and stuff, it's how does the team bring themselves together? And I think the thing about that an event like this is you get to see people almost in their best and their worst moments, sort of thing, because you are just sort of, senses and emotions are heightened at times. So you see people are like crying, they are just sort of like, they're getting stressed, but you do rally together. And I think you need to sort of expend that time with people, seeing them for their best in their best and their worst lights. And with that, if you can like support them and be with them throughout all of it, I think that's what makes something like truly great, and actually spending that time with those people. So all of that team that I ran with, like I've seen them in, for the best, the worst sort of moments of them during this race, and we all got through it. And I love the adversity, and ultimately like it's a race like the Speed Project highlights the greatest of humanity. Like, you will rally together and you will support each other. And I thought it was wild watching, like, it wasn't just us, it was like all those teams that were running. You know, some people aren't doing it there for the time. It is like, there is a greatness in just being able to participate, and just to get to the finish line is an incredible experience. Okay. And the teams that would do it, it's just amazing to see how they would all rally around each other, support each other, and completing it was just, you know, it's a beautiful thing to see for a lot of them. But like I said, I think it is all about the journey rather than that destination.
I've known a lot of people who've done it over the years. Most people are doing it in some kind of group relay, and it does make it just more accessible because you've got the support of the team. And if you kind of aren't fully confident, you've got someone else who can kind of fall in place with you. And it is incredible that it kind of opens that up to being like, yes, you can come. You don't have to be at the fittest. You don't have to do the whole distance. You don't have to do, you know, as much distance as other people, but you can just come and be part of a team. And you can get that collective spirit and feel so satisfied at the end by just covering a huge amount of distance, which you wouldn't be able to do on your own. But speaking of people who did do it on their own, one person we know, person is a friend of the podcast who's been on is Jonty.
Oh yeah.
Who did it. He's done it as a group, I think 2 years ago, maybe, with the No ID crew, who I think came the first Europeans, I think, potentially. I think they're European champions. But he went back, I think, 2 years later to do it on his own. So this is another form of doing the Speed Project, not just as a group or the OG or freestyle. Yeah. It is doing LA to Vegas solo. And so I've not seen him since, actually, but I've been following him on his socials, and he came fourth, which I'm not sure how many people were doing it, but that's remarkable.
Oh, it was incredible. Absolutely incredible. So I actually went and saw him. I went down to Run Limited to go and see him last week, actually, to just have a brief catch up with him. Poor boy's still very much like, the body is recovering, understandably. What he did, I think that is something that is truly remarkable and incredible. That one is very much, I think, feel free to shout about the numbers, because he leaves on effectively that the solo race starts 5 days before we start running.
Because it takes longer.
It just, because it's just understandably
one person doing the whole thing. They're not doing tempo.
Exactly. But I thought, and this is with most of the, like, all the solo runners who did it. I thought, and especially, and this is also a big shout out to those that are supporting those solo runners, and with Jonty and like his support team, it's like the photographs and the videos were, they perfectly summed up what I could imagine a solo run to be like. The euphoria, the amazement, those first couple of days of feeling absolutely fantastic. Like, you know, you're in the flow state, you're in the zone, life is good. And then all of a sudden it's that kind of like, the body just begins to just disappear on you and it begins to hurt. You get the pains, and all of a sudden the mental game starts coming in. And I remember seeing some of the photos of Jonty during it, and they were absolutely fantastic photos, because I think they perfectly capture like just the grit and determination and the adversity that he faces and overcoming all of it. And like, let's also not forget that one of the things that Jonty's done for the first time is that he's a type 1 diabetic, and he's the first type 1 diabetic to complete the Speed Project. So there is also, it's not just about getting like slapping down some energy gels and stuff. He needs to manage that on top of it. And doing that whilst in ultimately like a state of delirium. Your feet are absolutely destroyed, your hamstrings, your knees. It's incredibly impressive. So yeah, absolute kudos to that guy and to everyone else.
And to his crew as well.
And to his crew. Yeah.
Yeah. He seemed like they were very militant in their kind of getting him ready. Whenever he came into the van to rest, refueled, cool his legs off, cool his body off. I think he did, let me see on his socials, he says he covered 479 kilometers.
Yeah.
That is a long run.
Yeah, that is, It's not just popping out to the shops, is it? That kind of run right there. It's quite something. And bearing in mind, like, I'm talking about how when we were running, and he was doing a similar route to what we were doing, I'm there running for 1 mile repeats or something, in the heat, And I'm getting like, I've got disgustingly white Casper friendly skin going on here. I was getting burns during those 1 mile repeats. And then I would jump into a car and cool off, or like, the windows would be open and so the air would blast at you, sort of thing. He's out in that for the whole day, like absolute scorching heat. It's mind blowing, really.
Well done for completing that journey.
Thank you.
And from the incredible adventure, I'm looking forward to seeing some more, content that you've got to push out.
Yeah.
And what that meant with you. How did it feel at the finish line when you actually did just achieve this momentous journey?
You know what? It was one of those funny moments where I genuinely, I was over the moon. I was absolutely thrilled to have done something which I've wanted to do the speed project for a number of years, about 6 years now. I've wanted to participate in it, but never had the opportunity to do so. So it is like fulfilling like a little bit of a dream of mine, and to do it with such a great bunch of people, and to stand there beneath the "Welcome to Las Vegas" sign it was pretty special. And it's certainly something which will last long in the memory. So yeah, I'm so happy to have done it. And it's just another one of the adventures.
Great. And you're back in the UK. You brought the son back with you.
Briefly.
Well, no, it's been good.
It has been good.
It's been great.
Yeah.
Okay, we're recording this mid-April. Up until now, this is probably the first rainy day we've had in a while.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I've been away out of London for a good month now, soaking up sunshine. It's been phenomenal. And I assume London's had a lot of that as well.
Yes, London the last week or two has been absolutely delightful. And again, I don't think like London when the sun is shining is absolutely incredible.
Anywhere in the UK.
But yeah, exactly. I was going to pivot on this and then say, however, getting out to the countryside, to certain places up north and down south, as you will rightly attest to, is quite lovely.
Yes, so I will share these adventures. Before we do that, I just want to talk about the podcast. And thank you for anyone who's been listening in the last few months, been continuing to put out content, one episode every 2 weeks. One episode really hit a mark, and I'm excited to announce it has now become the most popular episode on Spotify and all the listening channels. And it's taken our good friend...
knocked Anna Jackson off.
It's taken our good friend Anna Jackson off the top perch, which I'm sure she will be fine about. She's been up there for a good year. And that is the episode with Charlie Wild from the Travel Project. It was a collaboration which I personally thought was, a beautiful collaboration about someone who's celebrating UK travel and adventure alongside a podcast that's trying to do the same. But you never really know how a conversation will hit, especially with someone who's maybe kind of like an Instagram creator, because, do people actually really care about the story behind that, or do they just want to see pretty content? Turns out the reel that I made has done really, really well across all socials, and it's brought me in a bulk load of followers and lots of engagement, lots of likes, so many comments. Well, I'll go through a few of them because it's actually a little bit of a split bag. I say it's split, but it's mostly all positive. People, are really excited to see something that celebrates the UK. So to give you some context, if you've not seen it, this reel, he opens by saying the UK is a really underrepresented destination for travel and adventure. And I asked why. He says because it's perceived as boring, but actually it's amazing. And we're trying to show that. And a lot of people were positive and like, yes, I think the UK is amazing. I go on holiday, blah, blah. Then there's a lot of people. There's another side of the story where people are saying it's expensive, the weather is terrible, the food is terrible, it's cheaper to go fly abroad. And so I just want to discuss this kind of topic now and open this up between the two of us to discuss perhaps some of these comments. Let me see if I can find a couple. One comment, it's got amazing places, just not the weather. Another comment, trains are just unbelievably expensive. This one is in capitals. You can get a cheaper flight from London to Gran Canaria /Africa than a train to St Ives in Cornwall. There are lots of places in the UK that are nice in the summer, but it's also disgustingly expensive, so not worth it. Now, I'm wondering as well, so some comments because he puts stuff on the internet, there's global people. So there's probably people who see the UK as a potential travel destination that they would love to come to, but perhaps it is actually more expensive than holidaying perhaps in Europe somewhere. I'm not entirely sure how that kind of transcends to external people. I'm really trying to encourage people within the UK to celebrate what we have. That's really fundamentally what I stand for. But from the back of this, I've obviously like put some content out that is advertising Britain to the world. And it's fabulous that some people are like, yeah, I love the UK. I come holiday here every year and I really love it. And other people are like, I would really like to come and visit, but I just find it expensive. And I can actually see that now through their eyes, because when you're not within the UK, you're seeing things through the internet by booking trains, by booking hotels. And then you're just only going to get the high price things, which you're not going to know about the secret ways of finding cheaper accommodation or cheaper train travel or travel around. So I get that. And clearly there needs to be more work to do in opening up that kind of topic and getting someone on maybe who can help me discuss stuff like this going forward. I'm definitely going to have Charlie Wild or his partner Jess on again in the future, because it's such a popular collaboration. But wonder what your thoughts are on those kind of topics.
I think it's really interesting, those comments, because they're all comments which, to an extent, they are all correct to some extent. I think. I think it's, as you say, I think there needs to be more done to highlight, for instance, travel hacks or little ways that you can reduce the pricing, because I would tend to agree on certain aspects of that. I do think if you do get a train from London down to St. Ives or something, you go further than Bristol Temple Meads or something, it's like that ticket is a phenomenal amount is a very large amount of money, which I think if you're coming from abroad, you've usually, relatively speaking, if you're coming from abroad, you've kind of got a little bit more of a holiday mindset. Like the money itself is slightly less, it's holiday money. I think, though, if there was more done in terms of demonstrating that there are almost little hacks that you can do where you can buy different tickets that can go to different places along route, which can ultimately reduce your prices. Because I've done stuff like this where I've stopped off at Avebury or something and gone to like the Avebury Stones, which is like essentially a slightly less popular Stonehenge, and then from there go.
I would argue better than Stonehenge. You can touch these stones. And it's bigger.
I do genuinely.
Kudos to Avebury Stone Circles. Yeah,
thank you very much.
Fabulous place. It's rather than it being a place and a field, it's a village. Yeah, the village is spawned around these circles. So it's you don't have to pay.
No,
you have to pay to see Stonehenge.
Yeah. Stonehenge is itself is like, I shouldn't knock it because it's not far from where I used to live, kind of thing. But it is just comparatively, you can go to Avebury just a little bit further away, but again, have almost the same effect with the stones. And it is, as Tom said, it's in like a village. So you've got like a nice little pub there. You've got some shops. You can wander around an area freely without having to just essentially circle the circumference of Stonehenge and have somebody like look at you a bit moodily about like getting too close to it. So if ever there we go, little hack, little alternative there. If ever you do want to see something like some monolithic stone structures and things like that, monolithic, Neolithic, one or the other.
Well, while we're on this topic, actually, there are lots of stone circles in the UK or similar. I recently went to one in Cornwall, which I'll talk about, which is called the Hurlers. It's tiny. I mean, these stones are like about the size of me and you. They're not that big. But again, you can just go. They're not Avebury and they're not Stonehenge. There is Calendish, Calendish stones, which is in Scotland on the Outer Hebrides. Again, free to visit. There's a lovely cafe right nearby. They are, I'd say, in between Stonehenge and Avebury in terms of size, but there's a lot of them and they're massive. So shout out to them. And if anyone else knows of any other great stone circles or things, we have a lot of them in the UK, more so than I can remember. But
good number.
Just shouting out to Avebury, to the Hurlers in Cornwall, and the Calendish stones in the Outer Hebrides. There we go. There's 3 for you. There. They're free.
Sounds like 3 sort of like rugby league teams or something going on in there, doesn't it? I quite like it though. Yeah.
Going back to your point about getting a train in places, and stopping off.
But I would say like there needs to be more done to sort of demonstrate that there are kind of like these little hacks that you could do where you could stop off there, have a look there, and then continue on your journey. And that would actually, and annoyingly, 2 separate journeys is often more affordable than paying for the one, even if you actually get to the same destination. And there are just little things like that, which I think sort of could really help and benefit a lot of the UK. Yes, the weather is at times not particularly great in the UK.
Well, we discussed this in the conversation with Charlie. We talked about weather. And actually, we kind of came to the conclusion that the weather is not that bad all the time.
No.
And actually, when we do get very, very bad weather, it's actually a very small amount of time. We do get weather where it's mixed, but typically, because we're an island country, it passes. So you can be lucky to have weather where you get sunshine, cloud and rain all in one day.
Yeah.
That's a typical British day, right? Yeah. But you get those moments of sunshine.
Yeah.
So you can't complain about that.
You can't no, exactly. It's like we have them, but it's not... Nothing here is like necessarily horrendous. Obviously, we do get like some terrible storms and things like that as well. I say terrible, like comparatively, some bad storms. But like all this being the island, as you say, they pass. And there's still plenty, if anything, there are certain parts of the UK anyway that I would say actually lend themselves quite nicely to the slightly more, let's just say, the gritty, grisly grey weather that we have going on here. But I think it is as much about just adjusting people's mindsets as to what to expect in the UK. I think, yes, again, as people have pointed out, you could get a flight to southern Spain for you could get a flight to southern Spain for cheaper than you can get a train ticket down to Cornwall. That's unfortunately a fact. But
I think one of the key hearts of what myself and the travel project are trying to promote is celebrating the local and actually saying adventure doesn't have to be far-flung.
No.
Yes, it's great to travel and it's great to experience something new and different. But within the UK, we are so lucky to have the most diverse landscapes around. You're not that far from the sea. There's usually some kind of hill that's around that's good to climb up. There's amazing walks. There's national parks all over the place. Yeah. There's area of outstanding natural beauties, which have been renamed to national landscapes. They're amazing places. There's loads of them. You're never actually that far from something that is nice. So it doesn't have to be expensive. You don't have to go far to get that sense of adventure and get that adrenaline rush.
Right. And I don't think you have to go... Like, for instance, you mentioned there about going down to St. Ives and stuff. And St. Ives is absolutely stunning. But you don't need to go to St. Ives in order to have these adventures. Like, there are plenty of things on your doorstep that ultimately, they won't always appear in your top 10 travel guides and like your top 10 blogs and vlogs and stuff. Like, it's not everything's going to be on TikTok that is so great about adventure.
Yeah.
You talk about areas of outstanding national beauty. It's like, I grew up in one of those. And
which one was that?
So Salisbury Plains.
Oh, lovely. Yeah.
Yeah. So I grew up over there. And honestly, like one of the most beautiful areas that I could possibly grow up in. It's got beautiful country villages, town pubs, beautiful walks, like all those things which you talk about.
Yeah.
And you don't...
The occasional bombings?
The occasional bombings.
Because they've got the MOD land there.
Yeah, occasionally. Yeah, they've got the
red flags.
You know when you see like... it's one of those weird things where you're used to seeing certain signs and then you just see the classic one of like a tank crossing sort of going on. It's just like, as you're just driving your car, just be like little triangle, tank crossing. Beware just be careful. Beware of tanks crossing. I've never experienced it, but I'd love to meet the person who did just drive along one day and he was just like, tanks just steaming straight past him. Like, oh, sorry about that, lads. It's fine. But no, it's one of these things. And like we are here, Tom and I both here in London, but you can get to like plenty of places within the space of less than an hour. You could be up in like the Chilterns, you can be down in the South Downs, you can be on the coast in Brighton, you could be Worthing, Eastbourne. There's so many stunning places within a short period of time. And sometimes that in itself has as much value as going off to the further flung parts of the UK as well.
Yeah, and you mentioned briefly about you don't have to go to these kind of like Hollywood style locations which you see on social media. And St. Ives, if you go to St. Ives, it's horrendously busy at all points of the year. It's going to be expensive. Yes, it is a lovely place, but I've always been very stressed whenever I've visited it for the day. I couldn't ever see myself ever wanting to stay there.
Yeah,
there are the most incredible places that are around. And those places also, they want you to come visit.
Yeah.
And you just got to do a bit of digging to research. So one of the places which I'll come to shortly, a place in Cornwall, which I didn't even know existed. I've had the most tremendous time there. And I had no idea it was there. I'll tell you what that is later. Just jumping in briefly to say, if you've got this far, you're probably a fan of the show. And it would be great if you wouldn't mind confirming that love by following or subscribing to this podcast. It takes just one click from you, but it really does make a huge difference in getting more people to find this show. Thank you. Before we move off this topic of what's been happening on the socials, I have to talk about the little Hollywood supporter that I have, or at least I'm going to put a little asterisk next to that statement and say had. Was
an accidental follow going on here?
There's no such thing as an accidental follow.
It's just a slip.
There's clearly some interest.
Clearly.
So there's been two kind of like big names actually that I noticed have interacted with some of my content. It's been a good year this year. I think Nick Bester had a reel which went out and did quite well. That was him talking about how hard it was for him to run a 3-hour marathon because he felt really slow and sluggish. And I just love that because it's actually true. He runs a 2:20 marathon at his tempo. So if you compare that to what your kind of fast marathon is, and then like you run a slow marathon, you're just spending so much more time on your feet. And it's just, just because he runs a 2:20 means that a 3-hour marathon is slow. But for a lot of people, the 3-hour marathon is super fast.
It's the pinnacle.
Yeah. So there's a lot of funny comments on that. Someone just said the word same, as in like ironically, yes, same, yeah. And then clearly I had to do a bit of research from this. Someone with like a blue tick, and when you get a blue tick person comment, it goes into a separate area on your Instagram. It was the drummer from McFly, Harry Judd. He did a little laughing emoji to that person. And I think that person is his friend because I looked on the profiles and I was like, okay, they follow each other.
Had a good stalk on there, didn't we?
Yes. So Harry Judd from McFly has been interacting with my reels, but a Hollywood name has followed me from the travel project reel. And well, points and prizes, first of all, if you can guess. Okay, I'll give you some clues. This person is in the world of Hollywood. It's a male.
Great.
And they are a director and they are British. There you go.
I went, no. Just throw it at me.
Guy Ritchie.
No.
Guy Ritchie followed me on Instagram. 100%. I've got a screenshot.
I mean, did you?
Yes. I was out for the day and I came back, and because it when people interact with the blue tick, it goes into a separate place, and he'd done it like earlier on in the day. And I was like, what? You go on a profile and it's Guy Ritchie and he follows like Vinnie Jones and all these like Hollywood people.
I was just watching a Guy Ritchie film yesterday as well. God, it's fantastic. This is it.
And I was like, but he only follows like a few hundred people. So I was like, why is he following like little old me, Tom Bryan? And so I go onto his like followers list and I'm not there. So he's clearly, he's seen my reel, because when you see the reel, there's like the follow button is right next to the profile name. So you see when you're looking on reels, if you want to like go onto someone's profile, it's right next to the follow button. Conveniently put. So probably people with mispressed something. So he probably wanted to go on my profile to see who is this person, what's this reel, this is interesting. Press the follow button and then be like, oh damn it, don't want to follow this person, so unfollowed me immediately. But that still came through as a notification, which I've print screened, and I'm going to frame that and put that in my toilet.
I don't blame you on that one. That's a good follow to have right there. But no matter how brief,
it proves to some extent, at least, I think that he has seen the reel and he's probably agrees with it. He's probably like, okay, yes, I love the UK. Great. Who's this person?
And it just shows you also the ludicrous reach of social media and where it could get you.
Yeah.
Or who could see it.
Yeah. So there we go. Guy Ritchie followed.
Maybe he was looking for inspiration for his next movie.
Put this in my Instagram bio. Guy Ritchie followed me, January 2020.
maybe he's thinking of adding you as a little cameo appearance or something in one of his films.
Oh,
okay.
Like David
Beckham or something.
I want this to be down documented now. I'm going to get Guy Ritchie on the podcast one day. 100%. He's been on podcasts. He's the kind of guy who would come in. Just give me some years to get this podcast up and running into a national stage. We're getting him on.
You heard it here first, people.
He's the ultimate Great British Adventure. The amount of stories he's got to tell from his work he's doing. I should, while I'm here, just plug Guy Ritchie's new film, which is coming out.
You're gonna plug Guy Ritchie's. He's not even following you. You're like, just to let you know, me and Guy Ritchie, he hasn't called me back yet, but you know, we're pretty tight with one another. Left him a bunch of messages. You don't even know what Guy Ritchie's new film is.
There's a new film. Guy Ritchie's got a new film called The Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare.
That's been out for ages.
Okay, not that one then. Which is the one I saw?
Literally, that's been out for so long. Which is the one
I saw it, and I was like, I've got to mention it. Guy Ritchie. Okay. Also, I don't follow Guy Ritchie on Instagram. So
wait, so he followed you briefly, and you just decided like, nah.
No, I was playing it cool. I was like, I'm not going to just follow him back immediately. I need to be like, cool. So now I'm on his profile. I'm going to hit that follow. He follows 146 people.
You could be one of them.
I was 147 for a short while. Okay, we're clicking it. Guy Ritchie and followed.
And why has he not messaged you instantly right now?
I just wanted to play it cool. Okay, what's this film? I saw. Oh yes, it's this one. It's okay. Fountain of Youth. Have you seen this trailer?
No.
Okay, Fountain of Youth stars John Krasinski, Natalie Portman. It looks amazing on Apple TV Plus in May 2023. That's his new latest film. I saw that and I was like, regardless of you following me, I think this looks like an amazing film. So yeah, kudos to Guy Ritchie. Go watch The Fountain of Youth on May 2023. Okay. Shall I talk about my UK adventures and how I've been able to travel the UK very low cost and stay in some amazing places for free?
Yes.
So a month ago for my birthday, I wanted to get away from London. I needed a bit of a reset actually because I've been struggling this year. I suffered burnout at the end of last year. I had to work through January and carry it through while I was still doing podcast stuff. I think even when we recorded our last episode, I was still kind of in the midst of that. Finally took a break at the beginning of February for like a week when I was just ill and just like horizontal for a whole week, but then still had to get back and work. So even through February, I was still suffering from this. So I needed a reset. I wanted to get out of London. I needed an excuse to get outside as well because a lot of my work has now been inside editing and I'm just not as fit as I used to be. So I needed a spring reset, and those who listen to this podcast know that I use Trusted Housesitters, which is an amazing resource for finding accommodation, not just in the UK but across the world. But I've been using it in the UK to stay in some lovely places for free. And you basically exchange your services as a pet sitter or a home sitter, but it's typically looking after pets in exchange for staying in some really, really lovely locations. I've been doing it for years, looking after cats and dogs, and I found a beautiful holiday cottage off Bamborough coast, off Bamborough Beach, where the owner had a holiday cottage, but then had now moved into it in her retirement, and was looking after one dog, which seemed very easygoing. I had a video call with her, and then committed to it, and then went up there. It's a long drive up to Northumberland. I'd been as a kid, but not recently. And I really wanted to explore that place, but it was also a working week. I did take my work with me. I recorded a podcast while I was up there. I was finishing off my writing project as well. So I didn't get like the full time to kind of go out for like proper day trips every day. But I did meet a friend on the Scottish borders and went for a hike with them. And I met another friend, a fellow midnight runner who lives, or his parents live up there, who was visiting, and we went for a run together. But then I just had Bamborough Beach at my own disposal, like every day. Just the most stunning beach. Like the UK has some like real, like incredible beaches, and Bamborough's up there in the top tier.
Yeah, definitely. I think, like you were saying earlier, if there's one thing that we do have in the UK that is totally underrepresented and not known about quite nearly as well as other parts of the UK, it's the fact that we actually have incredible coastline and incredible beaches along there. So I've never actually been to Bambo, and I would love to go there and go to the at least have that view where you stand and look at the castle and stuff. So did you get that when you were over there? Did you you
cannot miss the castle.
Yeah.
And actually when I arrived, it was dark and I was driving into Bamborough town, which is a tiny town. It's more of a little village, but the castle is like 3 times the size of the little village. It sits on top of a hill, right perching onto the beach. So it overlooks the beach, over this white sandy beach, straight into the sea. And as I was driving in the dark, they had put the lights on, which they don't do all the time. The owner was like, oh, they don't always put the lights on. But I was like, it just was like the thing that just stuck out from the landscape. This like castle beaming at me under its lights. And then I was maybe like a 5-minute walk away from the town. So as soon as I got onto the beach area where when I say beach, it's a sandy beach, but there are the most beautiful sand dunes there. So to get to the beach as well, you walk through these dunes and you can just get lost in this maze of dunes. There's so many of them. There's a few of the beaches like Woolacombe as well as another place with these beautiful dunes. But this castle just commands a view wherever you are. It's overlooking the beach. It's phenomenal. It's huge as well. It's one of the castles that's not it's not a derelict like piece of rock. It's lived in by a family. It's used. You can go on tour there. It is also, I would say, one of the finest castles we have in the UK as well. It's up there in probably the top 10. It's on comparison with somewhere like Windsor, for instance. So really, really lucky that I could have that daily on my daily walk, and just walking along the beach was like the one thing that everyone says about Northumberland is like it's just so quiet and there's no one there, and I can attest to that. I had a few dog walkers on the beach every morning, but the sun was out. It was a bit cold and a little bit windy, but when it's sunny, it just looks amazing. And I just had this huge beach all to myself.
Yeah, I'm very jealous of that because it is. It's exactly as you say. I think it's the very underappreciated versus certain areas around there. So just below it, obviously, you've got the Yorkshire Moors and the Dales, which are quite famous. So then to the west, you have the Lake District, which again takes a lot of the glory with all of its peaks and its high mountains and things like that. So comparatively, I think it is just in general more sparsely populated than some of the other regions, but that in itself has made it such a stunning place. And so I'm incredibly jealous that you actually made it over there. And also, as you say, a little bit windy, but you got some pretty decent weather when you were up there too.
Yeah, when the sun is out, it was sunny every day. So, when I say windy, it was just a bit of a chill in the air because it was still March then. So you still get the cold, and it is up north. And typically there are colder temperatures up north when you go than compared to down south. So I think temperatures were probably in single digits, but in the sunshine, as I said, it was still absolutely lovely. I didn't go for a dip. I think because I was working and I was looking after a dog, it just didn't really have the kind, and because there was a bit of a chill in the wind, didn't really have the kind of circumstances to do that. Maybe regret that a little bit, but it was still lovely, and I hope I can go back there again. I hope I can be in good. I think the owner did like me, so who knows? Might be there in the summertime and maybe go for a surf as well. Really good surfing beach.
Nice.
There are not just Bamburgh Castle up there. There's a place that's a little bit more inland called Alnwick, which is a town that's kind of based around this castle. A beautiful place. I didn't go to see the castle because it wasn't open. I did go to the town. Didn't get the best view of it, but I think the best view is when you actually pay to go in. The town itself was lovely little market town, much like we see kind of typically around the UK. I also went into Northumberland National Park for, as I said, a run, and I did my own little run up the Cheviot. Now, I have a story to tell about that, but I'm going to put that story in the Great British Misadventures jar, because it's quite a humorous story. So that will be told another time. Maybe it'll be told today if we draw it out.
If we pick it out, yep.
But I'll save that for the Great British Misadventures, and hopefully it might make someone smile.
How long were you over there for? 1 week?
I was up there for a week, yes. Yeah. Which was just enough time for me. It wasn't a full reset for me to kind of recover from my burnout. And as I said, I was still working. I recorded a conversation with Charlie Bennett, which is the latest episode which I put out just before this episode. He is someone who I didn't really know about, and as I was going up there, I was like, I should really look into trying to do some recordings. I messaged 3 people. 2 of them got back to me. One of them said they could do it that week, and that was Charlie. I went to visit his farm, where he inherited this land at the age of like 65 and has been turning it into giving some of it back to nature, but also keeping it as a thriving, productive farm. So the story behind that is what we covered. He's a great storyteller, and I'm not quite sure if that episode will hit well with the reel that I put out or some of the reels. But I will say, if you want someone that's just going to tell the most amazing stories about the history of the land and like working out what to do about like climate change and like the farming situation, like it's a fantastic listen, basically. So please, I hope more people check out Charlie and read his books. He's a fantastic writer. Shall I take you on my recent trip to Cornwall?
Please do.
I again found another lovely house sit. And on this website, you can set up like search alerts and you can put certain areas and locations. And I put one up for Cornwall because I really wanted to go in the spring. And I suppose I was probably looking for another place to be. And I probably found two places, which is why I went to Bamburgh and why I also went to Cornwall. It just so happened that two amazing places came up. And this place was in a town called Polruan, which I'd never heard of before. And actually, since now hearing about it, I've heard about it in a book, in The Salt Path, by Raina Rinn, about her walk, a hike she did with her partner across the Southwest Coast Path, which is a phenomenal book. It's been made into a film. The film is coming out this year, so go watch The Salt Path and read The Salt Path if you haven't. It's a well-established British adventure book. I highly recommend it. But in that book, she mentions Polruan because it's kind of a point in her journey where certain things change. I won't give anything away. Polruan is a harbour town, which is kind of shared on the other side of the harbour with a town called Fowey, which more people may...
People know Fowey.
Fowey.
Yeah.
I didn't know Fowey.
Oh, okay.
I had no idea Fowey existed.
I've been to Fowey.
So Fowey is spelt Fowey. If anyone wants to Google it, it's not spelled as it's pronounced.
Yep.
Fowey is a very popular harbour town, very popular holiday place in Cornwall, on the south coast. It's kind of just past Plymouth, so it's on our end of Cornwall, not going too deep into it. So it's kind of quite accessible. If you want to get a train, you go to Parr, and then you can get a bus from there. It is. I've just had the most incredible week there. So inspired, and I think I've been to Cornwall a few times, and only in my adult life, I didn't go there as a kid, and I've just really, really found an absolute love for it, for the rocky shorelines, the most incredible beaches. And over the years when I've been visiting, I think I've only ever been there camping. So my only experience of Cornwall is being somewhere quite rural in like a very, very small hamlet where you stay on a farm. And you might have like a beach available to you, and that's why you're camping there. So you can just go to the beach. But if you want to go to the shops or, see anything of culture, you've got to kind of travel there. And within that, I've traveled around, and, one of my favorite harbour towns is Porthleven, until recently. And I think that is now under attack by Fowey. I think maybe the two are slightly different. Porthleven is a much smaller vibe. Fowey is a much bigger entity. But this is the first time I've stayed in Cornwall in, bricks and mortar, and had a lovely house overlooking the harbour where you could just see everything that was going on down below. So it's just a hive of activity with boats, there's a ferry crossing that goes between Fowey and Polruan, which takes like 5 minutes, not that long, not that far. Fowey itself wakes up to the sun hitting it in the morning. So every morning I got woken up by a cat, which needed feeding at like 7 a.m, which is quite early for a holiday, but actually I didn't mind because as soon as I went into this kind of lounge kitchen area, had the biggest window ever, just overlooking the harbour. So once I was up and fed the cat, I just sat there with a blanket around me and just sat staring out the window.
Savouring the view.
Yeah, and the owners, they've only been there 3 years, and they said that in the first 3 months they moved there, they never turned the TV on, because they had this like live painting just overlooking everywhere. Phenomenal. I'm so inspired. I want to rave and shout about Fowey and Polruan. There's a bit of a caveat, and maybe we can talk a bit deeply into this, but I think that from visiting another town nearby, and I won't say which one, I then got the impression in comparison that Fowey is quite an upmarket town and possibly could be somewhat quite expensive to stay. They are mostly only holiday cottages. In Polruan, there's a campsite, which was, as campsites go, a campsite rate. But I think if you did want to stay there, you're going to have to holiday cottage or hotel. What's your experience of Fowey?
I think it's very similar to what you said there. I went there, drove through it, spent some time there, just like stopped off, like had a little wander around kind of thing. I would say it's gorgeous, like beautiful little spot. Again, though, it's that it is alluding to what you just mentioned there, the fact that I do know about it and I have stopped there, and I'm the sort of person that's come from London kind of thing. But equally, it would have been, there are plenty of little towns and stuff and villages in the surrounding area, but I wouldn't really know about them too much either. So there is this horrible thing where I kind of feel like I loved it and supported it, but also probably plenty of other places that I could probably spend my money and support instead of just going to the same place.
Yeah, this is quite interesting actually, and I do like to go to different places. Because I've been to Cornwall a few times, I didn't quite know what Fowey and Polruan would offer me, and when I was looking at a map, my eyes were going to the places that I'd been to before. I was like, okay, well, if I have to, I can drive there and I can go to this place. I know that's good, and I can go here, and that's good, and that's good. So it was almost like me having a backup plan when I went, because you can't really tell really about anything. But I love this kind of sense of adventure, and I had this going up to Bamborough as well, of like going into the complete unknown. And I was like, I'm not quite sure what I'm going to get from this. And I suppose you do get that, but man, I was incredibly like happy that I had gone on this exploration, because I didn't need to go anywhere else. And actually, I'll talk about what I did across the week, because I really have got a full, deep understanding of what Fowey has to offer in its deep kind of like history and heritage. It's a place where it's got so many stories to tell because it's been used for centuries. It's a very thriving harbour town. There's so many stories behind that about kind of all the ships coming in, and there's these two blockhouses which sit opposite each side of the harbour, which used to have a chain that linked between the two, and that would be its defence. So if they didn't want a ship coming through, they'd like rig up the chain. And I was standing there and imagining them like all this like mechanisms, like trying to draw this chain in to stop any kind of like pirates coming in or something like that. It was a place used in the war as well, and there's some photography of some of the ships in the war there. It has ferries coming in as well, just sitting in the middle of the harbour, which is quite outstanding. There weren't any when I was there, but seeing the images of that was just this massive, like gigantic ferry sitting in the middle of this like harbour. There's one famous author, and there's one other author who's famous, but possibly only within the regions of Fowey. And I want to talk about them because I think this is where I think the journey for me had a real better kind of understanding of its history and its heritage. So one famous author, Daphne du Maurier, who wrote The Loving Spirit. She also wrote Rebecca, and many other books, which are, a lot of them are set within Cornwall. She was based opposite Fowey, but not in Polruan, in a tiny little place called Bonnerick, which is where the car ferry goes. So there's two ferries. There's a passenger ferry and there's a car ferry, both off on different sides of the harbour. She lived in this house called Ferryside, and you can see Ferryside because it's right by the ferry. It's right by the side of the water. It is the most stunning house. And in the afternoon, it just glows in the sunshine. And you see this like place where this author lived. And then you go to like what's the bookshop? Shrew Books in Fowey, and you can go buy her novels and then read the books that she wrote in this area. And that I found that just very inspiring, and I was like, well, I've got to go and buy these books. There's another author I didn't know about, and on the first evening I went for a walk. It's a famous walk in Fowey called the Hall Walk, and it goes to Bonnerick where there's a ferry, and you get the ferry across and you can get the other ferry back. It's a circular walk taking in two harbours. And in the middle of this walk, I came across a monument which was dedicated to an author called Arthur Quiller Couch. And he seemed like he was a very respected gentleman of the town. And so I was very curious about him, and I've learned a lot about him since. He also had a home in Fowey called the Haven. Now, this sits on Fowey side. It has the most commanding view of the harbour. It's right on the water side. It's got some pretty decent real estate for the town. And I didn't realise, but because the view I got of Fowey town, and I was looking through binoculars and seeing these amazing places, you could see it, and then you could see this house, and like straight opposite this house I was staying in was this house this author was in. So I had to go get his books. They're all out of print because he's actually quite an ancient author. I think this book I've got here was published in 1800s. This is The Astonishing History of Troy Town, which is one of his most famed books, first published in 1888, a full 100 years before I was even born. But thankfully, the little shrew bookshop in Fowey had a few of these kind of like secondhand books. So I bought one, and I bought a second one called Memories and Opinions, which is his unfinished autobiography. It was published in 1945, I think the year after he died. He wrote perhaps maybe 5 chapters, I think, before he passed, which there's an introduction in the book from another author who wrote and said that this book basically covers his life up to the writing of Troy Town, which is the book that I purchased. But there's a lot of his life that came after that. And I bought that book as well, not because I was particularly interested in this guy, but because when I opened it, the first chapter was called Polperrow, which is the nearest town along the coast on the Pole Ruin side, which is a place where I got a bus to, then hiked the coastal path back. So I visited this town of Polperrow. So of course, when I realized there's a whole chapter about it, which is basically where his grandfather grew up, and that kind of is the starting of his life, I had just been there a few days before. So I wanted to read about the history and what life was like in that town, 100 years before I was even on this planet. So I haven't touched this book yet. I'm still near the very end of Memories and Opinions. So I've been enjoying reading that book over the last few weeks. I was reading it while I was in Fowey, overlooking the place in which I assume he wrote it. And that is quite remarkable. And this is a lovely part of my little holiday I had in Fowey. And it was a holiday. I didn't take any work there. I had my laptop shut for the majority. I just had to send one email, and that was it. I got outside a lot. I hiked the coastal path in both directions. I went on a kayak up the River Fowey, which was phenomenal. And I went to the Eden Project for free.
Yes.
Can you guess how I got into the Eden Project for free on a Saturday? And the clue is in the Saturday.
No, in my head, I was like, I can see you, Tom. You could definitely be the sort of person, though, in my head, that just works at the Eden Project. You've just forgotten your high-vis jacket.
Oh, I would love.
Exactly.
Love
it. You've forgotten your high-vis jacket. You go in there, like, maintaining the grounds and stuff. But no, I'm guessing it wasn't one of those. So I was going to say Saturday park run.
You're in the right lines,
because it does happen at the Eden, because it's one of the fastest courses that you can possibly do, apparently.
No.
But it's got a wonderful downhill.
Maybe, but there's some hills.
Okay, sorry, maybe not the fastest, but it's like very much like there are some.
It could be. You might be true. I'm not sure actually. It wasn't my fastest.
It was not one for you. Not one for you. But I do see that you can run around the ground. You run around a part of outside of it.
Okay, you've got it. So if you do the Eden Project Parkrun, which happens every Saturday, you will get free entry into the Eden Project.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Just by taking part. You have to take part. You can't be a spectator. They changed those rules recently. It used to be that spectators could get in for free as well. But clearly, like, anyone who's not...
I'm a spectator.
Yes. But because park walking is now so popular, if running's not for you, you can still walk it. And there's the tower walkers there for you as well. So as long as you're able to walk 5K, you can get into the Eden Project for free on a Saturday.
Well, that just seems... that's almost a no-brainer, because I think, isn't the Eden Project something like it's over £30 or something to go in there?
It's roughly 40 quid, slightly cheaper if you book online, and that's per person.
Yeah, regardless.
A couple, you're talking 80 quid savings.
Right.
A family, even more.
Yeah.
Obviously, with kids, maybe it depends on what you do with running. There were people with buggies. There were people who, I think, a family where one of the partners ran, and then the other one supported with the kids. So it would subsidize your cost of getting in. Yeah. That's a good way of doing it. It is an absolutely stunning run to do. You start actually outside the Eden Project, but in the car park area at the coach park. There's toilets there. It's a very accessible place to get to. And then you set off, and yes, it is a net downhill. So you basically, because the Eden Project is built in the old kind of quarries.
Yeah.
You start at the top of the hill where the car parking is, and then yes, you've got that kind of a decent downhill. But then you do, I think it's 3 little laps within the Eden project itself, and that is up and down. You actually go up this road, which is like a little zigzag path.
Yes.
There were a lot of people walking that, and actually I walked some of it because it's a stumpy little hill. But wow, like again, sunshine day for me when I was there. It's just stunning, like running into the Eden project, seeing it, and then you finish at the bottom, conveniently next to the cafe, and then that's it. You're in. Like you are allowed out if you do want to go back to your car. And the kind of the unofficial rule, but they do announce this, and I wasn't quite sure on this before I went, and I actually ran with my rucksack, knowing that I could dump it after about a mile running. Once I was down doing the loops, there was a place where the finish line was, and I dumped my bag there. I had a change of clothes in there, but you don't need to do that. You could leave all your stuff in your car. You're allowed back out to your car as long as you come back into the Eden project, show your barcode before 10:30. Which is fine.
That's great.
The only downside is if you finish at the bottom, you've got to hike uphill.
Yeah.
So actually, I would say if you've got a small bag, you don't need that much change of clothes. I wore the same trainers for the day. Yes, you've got to run for it for about a mile. No one else did. So I think everyone else. There's lockers as well by the coach park, so you could leave your stuff in there. But then you've got to hike uphill. Where when you finish, you've got coffee.
Yeah, you just go straight there.
And pastries. Yeah. I would recommend if you've got a Keepy cup, a reusable cup, you get 30p off your hot drink. And I wish I had that.
There you go. Yeah, there you go.
Extra savings.
Yeah,
it all counts.
That's it. It does. It really does. But that's fantastic.
Then you're in. You're in. Yeah. And then you just stroll around, and then you're like, wow, how did I get into the Eden project for free and save myself 40 quid?
Yeah, I mean, that's like a no-brainer, really. What a wonderful incentive to do there. If you think like, regardless of like, shall we say, the physical and mental benefits that come from doing things like park run and being able to go out and run, this one quite literally will save you money from going into a place right there. So yeah, that's what a great thing to do.
Shout out to all the locals who have that as their local. So I spoke to one there, and I was like, I'll just tourist using this to get in for free. Like, but no, there was a clear community of people, and what a fantastic place to finish your park run, sitting in the middle of this like quarry pit with the Eden project surrounding you with like thousands of plants, having a coffee, and then yes, you might have a busy day, but you're like, actually, today I might just go and have a little wander around, and then I'll go home. Like, beautiful place to finish a park run. Like, that has got to be there in one of my top 10 in the UK now.
That's absolutely, I think that's absolutely awesome, and fair play to the Eden Project for letting something like that happen, and actually for agreeing to something like that, because I think it, as you say, it all supports each other sort of thing. So what a great thing to do.
What I'm now going to say is how you can spend your money in the Eden Project, because clearly, look, they're a charity, and they're, these kind of places use it or lose it in a weird way. Like, there's a huge upkeep in keeping something like this there, and if everyone gets in for free, then clearly it's not going to be a good brainer. So for me, I went there knowing that I would buy all my food there. So I had a coffee and pastry afterwards, and then I bought my lunch there. The lunch is fantastic. There's lots of options, but I went for like the canteen option. There's another pizza place in like one of the in the Mediterranean bubble dome thing, which is not as hot. They have a restaurant there which looked beautiful. I think they did pizzas, but I opted to go into the canteen, which was in the middle of the two bubbles. There was a choice of, I think, maybe 4 or 5 different kind of mains. Great deal. You picked one main, and then you could get a grain alongside it. So you get like a curry and rice, and then you got 2 sides, and it was roughly about a tenner. What I loved about their menu is that you had to pay more for meat. They had a plant positive menu. And I noticed this because obviously I'm vegan, and there were maybe like 3 out of the 5 were vegan maybe. And they were slightly cheaper than the meat ones. You had to pay an extra £2 if you wanted a chicken curry, for instance. I love that. And then as I was eating, I saw the signage outside, which was explaining their menu, and they were trying to make food cost what it costs the earth.
Right.
I love that about them. It was delicious as well. So, one way you can support and still get something back is by eating their delicious food there.
I think that's great. I really like that. I think that's, as you say, the explanation as to why they do that as well, I think is really good, because it doesn't leave sort of any room for sort of misinterpretation or sort of, and like making you feel bad about doing something. It's like, no, this is the reason. It's all, it all makes sense cost-wise. So yeah. Oh, I'd love to go there now.
Okay, I'll come to the end of what I did in Cornwall. I mentioned it earlier. I went to a place called Minions. Yes, yeah. This was what's the film called?
Minions. Despicable Me.
Despicable Me. It's pre-Despicable Me. This was a verified place name before then. I'd actually been before twice. I visited maybe 10 years ago, and then I passed through in 2019 as I cycled through Land's End, John O'Groats. It's a beautiful place within Bodmin Moor, which is stunning. And in the springtime, Bodmin Moor was beautiful. There's a load of gorse, which basically kind of grows in like land which doesn't grow anything else there. All of the gorse, and I actually noticed this on the drive back as well along the UK, was all in bloom. Like, it's beautiful yellow, just stunning. And in the sunshine, it was phenomenal. There's a place called the Hurlers, which is the stone circles there. And then a short walk from there is the Cheesewring. Have you heard of this? You probably never guess what it is from its name. It's it's a rock formation that's naturally been like eroded, so that you basically get lots of slabs of rock on top of each other.
That just look like
they're huge. They're like the size of like small houses, and you can climb on top of them. And it's
so they're not the size of wheels of cheese then going on.
From afar, they look like it. Yeah,
that's disappointment right there.
And then within that little vicinity, this is where I used I know. Do you know the Wild Guides, the books, publishing books? Okay, well, we'll talk about them now, actually. Yes. So if you want any inspiration for UK travel and adventure, look for your nearest Wild Guides. They have guides for different regions of the UK. They've got one for the Lake District. They've got one for the Midlands. They've got one for the South East. So, sorry, the Southwest, which is one I use for Cornwall, Devon and Dorset and things like that. And they have points of interest, and they highlighted there's a quarry within Bodmin Moor, which you can hike to, which if you wanted to, you could swim in. I didn't because it was freezing cold. Although, kudos to 3 guys who just rocked up, 3 Cornish guys who obviously finished work in the late afternoon, got to the top of this like quarry area and was like, yeah, we can jump from this bit or we can jump from that bit. And they went to this bit. It's like, oh, it's too windy from there. We might get blown back into it. And I was sitting there eating my lunch and being like, this is bitterly cold. And like, I'm thinking of what my dad taught me. It was like, always check the water before you get in. Like just a rule of thumb for general, like a PSA here for safety, like in open water swimming and wild swimming, is just check the temperature of the water before you dive in. And I was watching these guys like getting dressed, and I was thinking, I don't want to like get in and save their life, because if they get a cold water shock, I can't just stand around and not do anything. So I was preparing myself to go into the water and save them.
Did you dip your toe in beforehand then?
I dipped my feet in
just to get your preparation key.
Yeah,
preparation is key.
And my kind of 18-year-old self who trained as a lifeguard was like coming into like getting my whistle out. I wanted to say something to these guys, be like, don't do it, but I was like, I can't
deny them their freedoms right here.
I kind of thought that they kind of weren't the kind of people who wanted to be told what to do. And I was like, I'll just leave them be and like just keep myself quiet. And if I have to, I will try and maybe go in and save them. 2 of them jumped in and I filmed it for them because I was on the opposite side of the quarry, and then they swam back.
Oh, so you went for the complete opposite instead. You were like, I'm here to save you guys, but I will actually film it. But don't worry, I'll film it.
The filmmaker in me was like, this is going to look cool. I'll get it for you. And I shared it with them afterwards. But they jumped in and they were dead silent and they swam. And it was a long way to swim across this quarry to where I was. Didn't say a word. And they got out and they were like shivering cold. And I had a flask of warm tea, which I shared with them. And they're like, yeah, I wouldn't do that again. But they did it, and it got caught on camera. It was probably a bit too early in the season for that to be a viable, safe place. But that is called Gold Diggings Quarry, I think, is actually a really popular spot for people to go. If you look on Google Satellite, that's actually like a paddleboard in the water. Which, fabulous place to swim. I did go for a swim in the sea. It was a very, very cold dip in a place called Paul Kerris, which is along the coast on the Fowey side of the coastal path. It was a very, very windy day. I went for a run, super, super windy, but I found the most secluded area. It just goes to show of like how weather can be so different in very small local areas. Like on the macro, you could be having like gale force winds, but you find yourself tucked around like the side where you find a sheltered bit of land, and then you've got this sun trap on the beach, and that's where I sat, just soaking up the sun. And I sat there for a while. I had a pasty, and then I had my swim gear with me. I wasn't planning to, because when I was on the run, I was like, it's just too windy to be getting out of the cold water. And I sat there. I was like, there's no wind. I'm going to have to go in. So did a sea dip, baptized myself, did 3 dips, didn't do a full swim, but it was cold. It was this cold.
Fresh. Yeah. At that time of the year.
Yeah. Glad I did it. I could have done another one. I went to another beach called Atlantic Bay, which was on the walk back from Polperro. Stunning beach. I went there twice, actually. I went back again another afternoon to kind of just chill out one afternoon there. It was the nearest beach to where I was, even though it's still an hour's hike on the coastal path, because the coastal path is so raggedy. I kind of regret not going in, but it wasn't. Yeah, sometimes you're not feeling it, and I think sometimes when it's kind of March, April time, it's still really, really cold. So, I'd gone in once and that was it. But I kind of, after the second time I went to that beach, I kind of came back. I was like, I just wish I'd just gone in like one time, because you never regret it. It's a bit like anything, like when you force yourself out your comfort zone. Like it takes a lot to do it, but once you've done it, you feel amazing afterwards. And yeah, so
the post high is definitely there. But
yeah, I got back and I was like, it's not got that high.
Yeah,
but there we go. There'll be more sea swims, I hope, this year. So yeah, that concludes my little holiday in Cornwall. I will say I was there at the very end of March, just before April the 1st. So April the 1st is quite a key date in UK holidaying. It's really the date when the season begins. And it's actually, I think it's the date when like lots of people's insurance begins. So you'll see like there won't be many kind of like boat trips, for instance, or like kayaking hire until the 1st of April kind of thing, because that's when people's insurance starts. So I was there like a day, I think, before. I witnessed the ferry price go up, and I witnessed like lots of things starting to open. People were still doing work to their like businesses and things like that. It was lovely to see. But by the time I left, I was getting the ferry across the harbour and not having to wait. The day I left, there was like queues of people because all the people were arriving for Easter holidays. Yeah. So I felt like I'd got like the very best of my time there before all the crowds arrived. I was reading the parish news, because that got delivered to the house I was in, and I was finding out all the amazing things about the place where I was staying. There was a little article that was trying to promote holidaying in the UK and with holiday cottages, and to get more people to staycation out of season. Because a big problem with a place specifically like Cornwall that was heavily reliant on the tourism industry as one of its main draws of income, because it's lost so much industry from mining. But it's seasonal, so people really only get their income in the summer months, and they've really struggled with jobs and job security through the winter months. And there's a few places in the UK, in Cornwall, where that's not maybe as apparent. Somewhere like St Ives is like popular all year round. But like we said, there's so many other places that are absolutely amazing. Fowey is one of them. And you see the town. So many of these cottages are just holiday cottages. They don't even have roads next to them. It's just like the tiny little alleyways that lead to them. And it's just, they can't be a place to live anymore, because they're just not quite practical in that sense in modern day world, but they are the most stunning places to holiday. And I think there should be a real push to encourage people to go at times like I had, like early April, when it is just spring, when it is a lot quieter, and you get these places to yourself. I was walking around Polperro, which is a stunning harbour town, beautiful, quaint little roads and alleyways. And I had to stop and was like, in the summertime, this would be heaving. There would just be like 100 people in my way, but there was maybe like 5 people on this little street.
Were shops and things still open?
Good question. Yes, there were, but they weren't all open. And so you didn't get a full sense of what it would be like thriving. However, the caveat to that was they were all the same type of shop anyway.
Yeah.
So the shops that were open were just catering for the demand that they had. So you could still get your cream tea, you could still get your pasty, you could still get a coffee shop, but there was only maybe like one of them open in somewhere like Polperro, and I probably walked past maybe 6 pasty shops that were shut.
Yeah.
But I didn't need 6 pasty shops because there was only like 10 people around in the early morning that I was there. So there only needs to be one shop open. So really, like, it wasn't as if I was missing out. Yes, there might be, you know, a pasty shop that's, you know, doing something particularly you know, interesting that you might not have access to until the summer months. But it's the same in Fowey as well. Like, there was a lot there that I needed, and the things that weren't open I didn't need.
Yeah.
And it's really, those places only open to cater for that excess demand. So yeah, I don't think I really missed out. Obviously that April time is important because if I wanted to hire a kayak, which I did on one of the final days, it was only open for like the last few days when that I was there, because that's when their season was started. If I wanted to do that early in the week, I couldn't have done. And there was a few boat trips. One went to Mevergissi. That wasn't operating because it only operates in the summer months, but I ended up driving there anyway and seeing that. So yeah, you don't get everything, but you still get a lot for it. And just having those places to yourself. And I was trying to, I don't think I've been to Cornwall in peak, but I've been to St. Ives. And St. Ives is always peak.
Busy, yeah.
And so I was just trying to imagine that in all these other places. And I was like, yeah, like this is so much better to be here now.
Yeah.
And if you're lucky enough, you will chance upon some great weather. And I had sunny weather the entire week. There was one afternoon where it rained, and that was it. The rest of it, sunshine was out, blue skies. You could do anything you wanted to do within some, you know, certain reason.
Yeah.
And it was lovely. I've come back, ticked off some things in my, you know, to-do list for the year. Visit Cornwall, have a sea swim. I even visited Scotland, even though it was only for a day. So yeah, I'm
you can add it on there. I mean, I'm glad that you managed to do these trips, Dom, and actually come back feeling refreshed, invigorated, enthusiastic for what's to come, really. And as you said, I think especially on the basis of burning the candles a little bit at both ends from last year and earlier this year, I think there is nothing quite like getting out of London to see a bit more of our great Britain around here and seeing a little bit more of it. So,
I'm hoping that I've realised that I've done a lot of these trips, and I've been to Cornwall a lot, and Devon, and I know Norfolk quite well, and the South Coast as well a little bit now. And now that I have this podcast, it's so amazing that I can come back and talk about it and share these stories. I mean, I could go back into all the other trips that I've done, but actually, hopefully, I'll continue doing these amazing trips and finding these beautiful places and celebrating them and sharing them, and hopefully inspiring other people to go travel in the UK and see some of these amazing places. So yeah, I'll be sharing some of those photos from my trip on my socials soon once I get around to editing them. And I hope that, you know, people will see that and be like, I didn't know about Fowey. I didn't either. And I'm so glad I found it. Absolute stunning place. Also, I have mentioned the Trusted Housesitters app. I highly recommend it. There are other house sitting websites, but this I think is the biggest and has the biggest reach. Just to give you some context, it costs, I think, about £100 a year, but that's the only fee you pay. So the more you use it, the more you get back for your money. I more than make my money's worth out of it from just like a weekend away, for instance, because that's how much you might, you know, it might cost you to go away for a weekend and stay somewhere. So in terms of costs, I mean, I was commenting on some of the comments earlier about the on where I was staying in, like, this place is for free, and like, it's not for free looking after a dog. It's like, but it's what you take from it, really. Like, yes, I was staying somewhere for free. Yes, I did have to look after a dog, but it was actually a great excuse to get outside. And
for a lot of people as well, like, they very much enjoy looking after dogs and dog sitting and things like
Absolutely,
that.
yeah. And if you're on holiday...
And often these dogs are like, these dogs need walking, they need taking out sort of things. Like, brilliant, what a perfect excuse for me to go out and get some fresh air and explore a little bit more of the place. It's like, you know, it's work. Yes, it is, of course, and there is a responsibility that comes with that. But at the same time, like, if there's a choice of work that you can do, it's probably quite high up in being a good one. So, yeah.
I'll put a link down in the show notes for that. I've got a referral link, so you can get, I think, something like 25% off your first year membership. So it makes it really affordable. And it's not just for people who want to house sit, it's for people who have dogs and cats and want people to come and stay in their house. You know, it's a much more affordable way than putting people in kennels or paying for a cat sitter, dog walker, or anything like that. I'm going to talk actually very briefly about an app recommendation. Someone that two people actually recommended to me in my travels whilst I was up in Northumberland. My friend recommended it to me at the time, and then Charlie Bennett literally the next day when I went to record an interview with him, also recommended it to me. And then he's written about it in his books. Do you know about the app called Merlin Bird ID?
I do not, but I'm going to download it.
You would love this because you are a man who works outside. And this is for anyone who loves to be outside and is curious about the natural world around them. So it's a free app and it's called Merlin Bird ID.
Merlin Bird ID.
Merlin Bird ID.
By Cornell University.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. So download that. And then I think you might have to, it's still a free download once you're within it, but you should download like a European pack, which basically saves a lot of European birds. It's an app for finding out what birds are around you. When you're outside, you open up the app and you just press record and then it listens. And then you wait. And when you hear a bird chirping, it hears that. It references against its library of bird chirps and it will pretty much instantly tell you what bird it is.
So it's basically Shazam for birds.
Exactly. It's Shazam for birds. It is amazing. I do not know one bird call from the next.
Yeah, I can
I know a magpie, a pigeon, and a seagull, but I've learned that there's many gulls. It's not just seagull. There's many types of gull. That's all I knew. Now I can know a buzzard, the common chiffchaff,
I suppose.
and a nuthatch. They're the three maybe I could confidently. There's more there's things like the wren and the robin are a bit more complicated and they're quite similar, but I can now distinguish between them. And I'm like, okay, that's a chiffchaff. And before it was just noise, background noise.
Yeah.
Now you know this. It's amazing. I used it when I was kayaking as well because I thought I saw a buzzard, but I wasn't because it's a bird of prey. I was like, it could be another bird of prey, but I think it's a buzzard. And then as I was recording, this buzzard just made a sound and it came up buzzard. I was like, okay, so it is a buzzard.
Yep.
Love it. You don't have to type into Google a description of your bird and it comes up with 5 variations. It's just instant. Obviously, it has to be making a noise.
Yeah.
But it's phenomenal. And I've recommended it to a lot of people and I hope more people get it on their phone and enjoy using it this summertime.
Yeah.
And just being inspired by learning about what's around them.
Absolutely.
I would love to know what birds are around your coffee shop, your coffee van in Tooting.
Other than the common pigeon right there.
I bet you'll
there are a few different ones.
I bet you'll get a chiffchaff at least.
The
common chiffchaff.
The common chiffchaff. No chaffage.
Okay. I want to also talk a bit about my writing challenge. In the last 2 episodes, I've been updating you. I started the challenge in the first episode of writing 4 pieces of paper a day for the winter months. For the second episode, I was past halfway through it. And now it's finished. We're in British summertime. The clock's changed. I didn't know that non-British summertime, the winter time, is not 6 months. I thought it was 6 months long. I thought it was just equal par, 6 months winter, 6 months British summertime. Did you know that that's not the case?
And
British summertime is longer.
As in terms of the days, sorry.
Yeah. I didn't know. I thought this...
it just sounds right, doesn't it?
I was this challenge is going to be 6 months.
6 months.
Yeah, it's going to be 6 months long, this challenge. It wasn't. And I was like, I came to the end of it. I was like, I thought I was going to go for another month or so. I think it's roughly about 5 months versus 7, roughly that kind of split. Man, that makes me now think winter's not all that bad then, is it? If it's shorter. I thought it was 6 months of dark, gloomy, but no, it's not. It's only 5 months. And then we get 7 months, you get more time. That is a revelation. I can't believe I've got this far in my life to realize that British summertime is the longer, more celebrated. So I got to 106 days of writing and then I finished writing everything for this book. I don't have my writing with me. Unfortunately, I've left it somewhere else because once I finished all that, it's a big wad of paper. I did share it on my socials. This is a book I'm writing about my 1,001 days of running, my run streak. And so I've written about every single day that I've ran, and then I'm going to collate that into some stories, which will hopefully be a book in the near future, maybe sometime next year. I finished writing everything that I wanted to write about in 106 days. I still had some more time, a few weeks left. And I was like, well, I want this to be raw writing, so I will try writing some other projects. I've got other things I want to work on, some film ideas and some other books. So I for the next couple of days, I kind of tried to work out the next direction. And then I kind of started working on a film and I did 2 days. And this came in the point when I was really suffering from burnout and I was exhausted, and I'd been writing through this whole time, and I'd been podcasting and editing through this whole time. And as soon as I got to the end of writing this book, I just couldn't switch mindset into something else. I'd been writing about stories that I had lived, and then suddenly I was trying to write a piece of fiction, for instance, and then my mind just couldn't process that because it was exhausted. And then I realized that I hadn't really celebrated the fact that I'd achieved something in this challenge, which was celebrating finishing writing this like first like vomit pass of this book. So I was like, I can't just dismiss this. So let's stop, celebrate this. I've achieved something. So now I no longer need to prove anything to myself. I no longer need to be doing raw writing of 4 pages a day. What would be really beneficial if I could type up all these notes so that it's now a digital piece of work, because that's then what I can edit. So I then began a process of typing. My writing kind of challenge evolved into typing, and I was typing up all these notes. And then after a week or two of doing that, I was like, I wonder if I can get this finished by when the clocks change for British summertime at the end of March. And I did some calculations of how much piece of paper I had left, how many days I had left, and it wasn't good. There's a lot of typing I had to do. Typically, I think I was doing at the end, 8 days of writing per day typing up. So that's 8 times 4, 32 sides of paper I was typing up a day for like the last few weeks. It was a monumental effort trying to do this while juggling other things in life. Typing up 32 pieces of paper a day is a lot. You can't get much respite. And there's a few days when I was behind target, so I was having to do like double or extra days the next day. Got to a point where I had a weekend at my parents', and I just spent the whole weekend just typing, just trying to catch up. I really wanted to finish in time for the clocks to change, to celebrate that, but also I was actually going on holiday to Cornwall then, and I just didn't want to take any work to Cornwall. I wanted to finish, so I eventually got that done. It is a document which is too big to really comprehend. I'll come up with some of the stats now in terms of word count.
Give us that word count. Yeah, come on. Give us that sexy word count there, Tom. That's give us what the people want right here.
So the vomit pass of 1,001 days of running, The Art of the Run Streak, my forthcoming book, which is not finished, but is in a state where I have something to work with, is 109,000 words.
Wow.
A lot of words. There's too many words that will feature in the book. I have to probably cut this possibly in half, maybe take a quarter out at least. I'm not entirely sure. I think I did this in like 48 days. I did 2,200 words a day typing. Yeah. 2,000. I don't know how many.
At least that's what it averages out at, but like you probably did more some days.
I started slower, and then in the last 2 weeks I was
absolutely.
I was just typing like day and night. Yeah.
Burning your fingers off right there. I'd like to smash the keys right there.
But what a place to be, to celebrate that I said I'd do a writing challenge, and now I have completed something and I have something to show for it. It's not a book yet. It's a long way away from being a book, but it's a start, and I've done some of the hard work. There's a lot more hard work to come.
It's not even a start. It's not even a start, Tom. It's quite far in there. It's like it's a first draft, or like, as you say, it's at least the beginnings of that first draft.
If I were to die, that doesn't happen, but like it could be published as like, an unrefined version.
You're not going to be like this and do your memories and opinions and then like disappear off after 5 weeks.
Well, so crucially, Arthur Quiller Couch, the author of the book, author from Fowey, who is not very well known outside of Fowey, but I want to kind of highlight. He has a very, very cool phrase which is used in the writing community. His phrase is "murder your darlings," and this is to do with writing.
Oh, one would hope so.
And what it means is, if you think something doesn't belong in your book, even if it's written completely beautifully, get rid of it. And it's about saying like, yes, we can all write amazing pieces of prose if you really focus on it, but does it have a place in your book?
Yes.
So that's now the process I will have to go through, is being like, yes, this is lovely, but it doesn't add to the heart of the story.
Yeah. You see, I think that sounds a lot nicer there, Tom. Like, I won't lie to you. I think that sounds slightly unhinged, what he used there. Also, like, there's a reason why he didn't get to finish this, okay? When you think of terminology on how to rid yourself of work that you really enjoy and you have to get rid of it, the words murder your darlings does not necessarily doesn't come to my mind.
There's more to it, actually.
Is this what you're going to say to yourself, though, Tom, when you're there reading your book or reading your page and just going, oh, I'm so sorry, I'm going to have to murder you? Is that what you're going to be saying?
I've been so inspired by his story and his writings that I love that I can now use that within my own form of writing. And it's almost like poetic that I've come across him at this perfect time. I've seen where he's lived. I really would love to live where he lives. The house he has there is amazing. He obviously doesn't live there anymore, but I love that idea of being a writer somewhere by the coast, just having this commanding view of like a harbour and just being inspired by your writings. So do you want the full quote? It'll give it a bit more context.
Maybe it needs it. Yeah.
Okay. He said, whenever you feel the impulse to perpetrate a piece of exceptional fine writing, obey it wholeheartedly and delete it before sending your manuscript to press. Murder your darlings.
Okay.
So there was a bit more context to that.
Yeah.
But that's a common phrase now that's used within the writing community. Murder your darlings. There we go.
Is it?
Well,
is it? If there's any writers and authors out there who are listening to this, journalists, etc., if you've come across the phrase or if you use this phrase, murder your darlings, please do let us know. Let Tom know, because it's just be important for us to rectify this.
We've got to wrap things up quickly. Do you have a coffee corner for us?
I kind of do, yeah. Okay. Although this one is less of a coffee corner as it is just simply, I want to give a shout out to a wonderful coffee shop if ever you are in LA. So when I was over there, I was staying over in the Santa Monica area, which is where many people often go to. But there's a fantastic coffee shop which I went to every single day, sometimes 2 to 3 times a day. Had coffee, had breakfast, etc. And it's called Good People's. 100% recommend it. The coffee there is fantastic. They have a selection of various coffees from various places, various processes. And I guess this is something which I will pick up on at another coffee corner. And I will talk to you guys about different coffee processes, including things like anaerobic process and the honey process. But I just want to give a shout out to this coffee shop because it was absolutely fantastic. All these different coffees from Colombia, Honduras, Guatemala, Ethiopia, and they all had different processes, and the coffee was absolutely exceptional, both in terms of as espresso based with milk, but also their filters, and also the food was very good. And I would just thoroughly recommend it. So if ever you are in the Santa Monica area, type in Good People's, you'll find it. Great coffee shop. And that's what I'm going to give you for today's coffee corner.
Thank you. I can actually parallel that with a UK coffee-based company story, which actually I have from my Cornish adventure, which is quite funny actually, because I didn't actually realize this company was Cornish. I saw Origin Coffee around in Cornwall, and then I looked at a packet, roasted in Porthleven.
Yes. And
I've mentioned Porthleven. I've been there a few times. I have actually sat in the Origin Coffee in Porthleven, not really understanding its importance. This was on a bike trip I did with my friend. I wasn't into coffee at the time, but he was, and he needed a daily coffee, so he would often go get his coffee. And I remember one time when we were staying in Porthleven for a few days, I went for a run, and he went and sat and had a coffee and did some reading, and I met him there. It's a lovely little quaint coffee shop right on the harbour side. I don't think I was really appreciative of its place in the global coffee market, or at least in the UK coffee market. Origin is a huge brand in the UK. I just assumed it was London based because it's just one of those things that you just see on the internet all over the place.
Yeah. Well, I think again, I'd have to double check on this because I think I could get this wrong, but it was actually their shop that they had in Shoreditch, or their coffee bar that they have in Shoreditch. That was probably, I think that was their first one that they actually had, but their origins were always back in Cornwall. And then actually, for whatever reason, moved around. They started opening little coffee shops and the roastery, and they showed it off in Cornwall. So yeah, Porthleven, and they also have one other one over there as well, I believe. I think, but I've been to I think I've been to the one in Porthleven, which I think is, as you say, is on the like near the front. And then they also have. That's not where the roastery is. Somewhere else down there, I believe.
Okay,
but yeah,
it's quite
again.
hard.
You wouldn't like you just think by nature of it being here all over London and that it's very cool and quite dramatic and hipster, you'd think it was a London-based roastery or somewhere over here, but nope, it's all the way down in Cornwall.
There's actually another drink place that I've been to, which has its origin outside of London, which I didn't realise at the time, but then I did realise when I Googled it. Knoops, is it? Knoops, Knoops, the hot chocolate place. Do you know this?
Yes.
How does it pronounce?
No,
Knoops?
I have no idea. I just say Knoops.
Knoops is a posh hot chocolate place that originated in Rye, and they have the original store there where you can basically, if you go in on the back wall, they have like 30 different types of hot chocolate of different like cocoa percentages.
Oh, that's cool.
So it's like very unique. You can kind of custom make your own hot chocolate to some extent by different kind of levels of cocoa. I was on a bike journey in Rye and saw that. I was like, that's weird that there's one here, because I only know that in London. There's one in Richmond. And actually that was where it started, in Rye.
Yeah.
So there we go. Okay, let's close things. I think it's time for the jar of Great British Misadventures. There's one extra story that's gone in there. I've forgotten what the other ones are written. So for those who haven't tuned in before, inside the jar that Ben has in his hands are a list of phrases, each coincide with a story, funny or embarrassing, that I have had on my own misadventures in the world. And you're going to pick one out at random, and I'm going to tell the story of that word or phrase.
Precisely. So, right, here we go. We're going to have a little shuffle in here. Here we go. And we're going to pick one out. And today's story, we are going to be talking about, you are going to be talking about, finishing the jog.
Okay, when you said finishing then, I was like, what's that?
What's that? That's it. Yeah, something like that.
Okay, I've written about this actually in another kind of first draft of a book. In 2019, I cycled Land's End to John O'Groats on my own. It took me 9 days. I carried my tent and everything with me. It was self-supported in that sense. I only stopped to get food and drink and water. I did stay at my parents' one place, a friend's at another, and I did get a hotel room at one day, but the rest of the days I was camping along the way. The previous year, I had done my first ever bike tour. I was crossing France in 3 weeks with my ex-girlfriend. And that really inspired me to be like, okay, what else could I do? And, being British and living in Britain, I always knew that Land's End to John O'Groats, this famed cycling route crossing the country from Cornwall all the way to the top of Scotland, was there. And I was like, well, I've got to do it. And I found that Deloitte, the accountancy company, did something called Ride Across Britain, where they did this. You paid and you had this group travel where you did it across 9 days. You camped along the way, but all your equipment was transported for you, and your tent would be there when you arrived, set up, and you just have to, and there'd be canteen there, and you'd eat and you'd sleep there, and then you get up the next morning, have breakfast, and then continue to your next checkpoint, which is roughly about 110 miles away. So I just nicked their routes online because I needed a route. So I just downloaded the GPX data, and I was like, well, if people can do it, and that's quite an accessible thing for people to do, they don't have to be a super fit cyclist to do that. So I will do that. Not realizing that the self-supported nature of it, carrying a heavy weight on an already heavy touring bike, was a lot harder than if you were just doing it on a really light road bike with just carrying a few snacks and some water, and knowing that you had a checkpoint along the way where you could restock. I didn't have all that. I didn't realize how hard it would be. Cornwall was ridiculously hilly, not in a very high sense, because they're not high over there.
Undulating hills though, constantly.
You are always on a hill, either going up or down.
Yeah.
And the gradients of the hills in Cornwall aren't kind. They are steep and stumpy. And when you do that across 110 miles, I finished this end of the first day at like 7 p.m. and I got a campsite, and I was like, wow, this is taking me quite a long time. The second morning I woke up in this campsite, And as I got off my camping mat and bent my legs, both my kneecaps cracked. And I was like, this has never happened before. Like any like niggles I have on the bike, this is new. And then I suffered knee pain for the entire 8 days going forward. I was in agony. It was painful. And then because of that, I was at kind of a reduced kind of fitness level. I couldn't be maybe as fast as I wanted to. I got to certain climbs in like the Lake District when I was like, oh, if my knees weren't hurting, if I wasn't like downing paracetamol and ibuprofen all the time, I wish I could be at my best. But I still soldiered on. Took me all day. I was mostly cycling from like packing down the tent in the morning until sometimes like late at night, like 9 o'clock in the evenings. And it was tough. And the last few days in Scotland, I remember setting off and I was teary-eyed because I'd gone through so much in that time. And I was just so near the end, but I was also so close to finishing. And I knew I could get there, but it was still some tough long days ahead. And all I knew, I just had to get on that bike and cycle. And I made it. Got to John O'Groats. There was an oncoming storm that day later on, and so I knew I needed to get there and set up my tent before the storm. And I got there 7 o'clock, got my photo at the John O'Groats sign, and then went to set up camp. And then as I had set up everything, I got inside, and then the rain hit, and it was just absolutely tipping down with rain. I had no food, bar maybe a few pastries, which I'd been eating for the last 9 days and didn't want to eat. I wanted proper food. John O'Groats is not the most glamorous place to stop. There's not a lot there. There's a few hotels and there's like gift shops and maybe cafes that are open in the day, but not in the evening. The hotel was the only place I could go for food. It had like a bit of a pub in there. But it was still maybe half a mile away. And now the storm was fully hitting. So it was sideways rain, wind was galing, and I was trapped in this tiny little tent, starving hungry, knowing that I had to get out in this horrible weather and get to the pub. So I put on all my waterproofs, and I was a broken man already from like cycling for 9 days. And then I had to cycle up this hill that led from, because the campsite was right on the coastline, up this hill into the village towards this pub, battling this storm force wind just hitting me, the rain getting me soaking through. I got to this hotel and locked my bike up, and I walked inside and I was dripping wet. And I just apologized to them. I was like, I'm sorry. And they're like, it's fine. Like, this is Scotland. Like,
yeah.
We're used to it. And I was just, I'd arrived there not realizing that when you finish a tour, you need to upgrade your accommodation.
Yeah.
Like, if you've been camping along the way, when you finish, don't camp.
No, you need to reward yourself then.
Yeah. And I'd forgotten that because I was doing this on my own. And the tour I did with my ex the year before, we'd got an Airbnb when we finished, and we had a few days there, and we got to stay in a proper bed, and it was lovely. And I'd just forgotten that was there. I was hoping that perhaps maybe family or my ex at the time, who was my partner, might have like surprised me either by one being there, and I knew that they were perhaps maybe one of them were thinking that at the time, possibly doing that, or perhaps booking me accommodation for me. Possibly. I didn't like the idea, but I was planning so much on my time every day that I just didn't have any time to kind of think anything ahead. And then as I sat down and looked outside at this storm force conditions, thinking, my tent is not going to be there when I get back. It was like the lightest tent with the lightest little poles. Basically, I was pinning it down in sand, which is not a great place to pin pentegs in. And I was like, I'm going to get back and I'm going to have nowhere to sleep, and I'm broken. It was funny because a lot of people who in that pub were sitting there for their evening meal, and they looked at me as I came in, being like,
oh dear,
are you camping?
Yeah.
Are you camping in this?
Yeah.
And that was when I was like, yeah, I am. Didn't think about this. And so I then went and asked the reception. I was like, have you got anywhere to stay? I was like really timid. And she's like, no, sorry, we're sold out tonight. And I was just felt so despondent.
Yeah.
And then I went to the toilet and I had a cry. Just burst into tears. And it was part like the finishing of the journey, but knowing that I just didn't really have the celebration that this journey warranted. Was that I'd accomplished something that was phenomenal, like 9 days crossing the country on my own. What an amazing adventure. all I could do at the end was just feel really shit about life, because I was cold and I was wet, and I was going to go back into the storm and not find my tent there.
But like, did anything happen? So what happened?
Well, I ate some food and I had a celebratory beer. And then I cheered up a little bit. I think I was texting my ex at the time, and it was hard maybe because I wanted to have a phone call, but I knew I'd just break down in tears. But I got back and my tent was still there. I was so thankful. Somehow I managed to sleep through the storm. I was that tired. I still woke up at like 6:30 in the morning because my body clock was just pumped in. And I really wanted to, I had 2 days in my schedule extra, which I'd kept as like a backup. And I didn't use that up. I should have done, because I was obviously suffering from bad knees. But I was so adamant to kind of finish this in 9 days that I had these 2 days spare. And so I could have camped for another night in John O'Groats, which is not the best place to be, but it's close to the Orkney Isles. So you can get a ferry across and you can do a coach journey where they take you around. And I looked into this on the morning and I spoke to people, to some tour operators, and I was considering it. But all my clothes were damp.
Yeah.
I was in wet socks. I was feeling exhausted. And all I wanted to do was just get somewhere like dry and warm and not be outside again. And I had this moment where I was standing, I was like, it's going to be a long time before I'm back in this place again in John O'Groats, the furthest northeasterly point of the mainland UK. And you could see the Orkney Isles. They're almost within throwing distance, some of the isles from John O'Groats. And I wanted to go and explore, because I was like, I'm not going to get this opportunity again. And it was a really hard point for me to have to separate that and be like, I'm going to go back the other way now.
Yeah. And
I respect my decision at the time, but there's always going to be that, I could have seen the Orkney Isles, but I was not in the place to see.
Yeah, but I would say, on that same note though, as in like the Orkney Isles aren't going anywhere. Like they're still there. The Orkney or the Shetland Isles, the only difference is that you're just not doing it on the basis of like cycling all the way up from Land's End to John O'Groats and being completely, well, hopefully not completely like disheveled, run down, and feeling a bit broken, a bit exhausted, tired, and a bit emotional ultimately, which is what all those things are. And I guess it is, as you say, like you probably like in certain aspects after 9 days as well, when you see that the end is in sight, everything about you just kind of like softens in the expectation of just like, oh, the relief to sweep you over of finishing, the relief of being like, you've achieved something so special, your body's going to relax a bit more now, your mind can finally settle. And I guess you just realize that despite all those things, there's this one final hurdle, which is so just annoyingly simple, but like is so important. And that's just, I needed warmth and shelter. And that you could, if you just like booked it, as you said, is like a hotel or something, or just somewhere that was just warm and dry, that you could hang your clothes up and let those dry and stuff, and eat in a good meal, you probably would have felt like a lot better for it, right? But as in, again, that's just one, but that in itself is just, that's a lesson that you take with you now for like your next trips. And
it is so important not to get caught up in this like self-supported, like I'm going to camp along the way. Like the hotels are there for your comfort when you need it. Yeah. You know, when the weather's bad or when you're just feeling really low and tired. I had this conversation with Geraldine McFall on her journey when she walked from Glasgow to Rome. She took camping stuff with her, but then she said like, yeah, but when I needed it, I got a hotel, and there's nothing wrong with that. You know, I'm privileged that I can afford that. And it's like, yeah, like that. You shouldn't be at your own detriment. And I was lucky that I did have a friend, and I had my parents to stay at, and I did have a hotel one night, so I did have those little resets. But also there's a little bit about me where I don't want to get too comfortable during the journey, because you want to be up early in the morning, you want to be up and out, and if you're outside, it's so much easier just to get going. But when you're in, like the time I stayed at a hotel mid-journey, they didn't start serving breakfast until like, I mean, it was like 8 a.m. or something. It was quite late. Yeah. And I was like, I would be on the road now, but I've got a free breakfast that I'm waiting for. And yes, it was worth it because it filled me up. But I was like, I've lost an hour of riding here, and I could have just picked up something on the road. So there's two parts of it. Yeah.
I guess it's just balancing. Like, I agree. Like in terms of it's easy. You just, the fear of being complacent is always there. But I guess you almost answered you answered your own question there, but also kind of countered yourself there by saying like how oh my God, you wasted an hour in which you went on the road. But it's like, yeah, but you got a nice full breakfast meal out of it that like kept you going and satisfied.
Balance, yeah.
So it's all about balance and learning that, for every right, there's a wrong, yin and yang, all that stuff going on. So yeah, at the end of the day, I think from this perspective, it was just simply like, if there was a time to afford yourself a luxury and to be complacent and to be happy, it's at the very end of a trip in which you've like, as you said, you'd strived for, regardless of what you wanted, you had those 2 extra days, but you'd already made the investment in your head to go, I want to do it in these 9 days. I know it's not necessarily always the most sensible thing to do, but you want to do that and you did it. And that's absolutely awesome. But your reward was instead to ultimately spend 1 more day out, like in the pouring rain, which was probably not what was needed.
Yeah. So there we go. Another great British misadventure done. Hope you enjoyed that story.
I very much did so.
Thank you very much, Betty P, for your time today. Great that we've both been on our own adventures. Who knows what the next 3 months will have in store?
Absolutely.
Find you out on Trailside Coffee on Google Maps.
Yep.
For the best outdoor coffee in South London.
That's it. Exactly.
I hope the weather is good for you. I imagine it's been a good, fruitful time.
It has, yeah. Last couple of weeks and even since the start of this year, where January and February are ultimately not very nice months to being outside trading, people have been coming out, been showing their support. I've been very grateful and I'm very happy with how things are at the moment.
But so, much like the off-season Cornwall holidaying, off-weather coffeeing outside. It's also, I bet you appreciate that. If people still want to come when the weather's not so good.
Yeah, I mean that's it. I respect anybody who decides to come out in the pouring rain when basically still adamant that they get their nice silky smooth flat white going on. So I'm like, I will be there for you. Don't you worry.
Great. Coming up, you have London Marathon at the end of this month.
Yes.
So we'll have a detailed breakdown of how that went for you next time. When's your other marathon that you're doing?
I've got London and I have Berlin, but that's later on in the year.
Okay, so that'll be in another episode. Yes. Okay, great. Yes. So I look forward to hearing about that and following that. Who knows what adventures I'll be on in the next 3 months. But yeah, we'll catch each other again probably in 3 months' time.
Absolutely, yeah.
Thanks so much for tuning in. If you want to find out more information about any of the guests, please check out the show notes where you'll also find links to things mentioned in the conversation. And if you've enjoyed this episode, please take a look through the past recordings. There's so many more incredible stories for you to find. And I can't wait for you to enjoy them. Thank you.